prometa que vai resolver o problema da crise climática, porque os acordos que estão sendo feitos nas COP não estão resolvendo nada.
The deals that are being made by the global leaders, they're talking about billions of dollars, but they're not solving anything.
São 1,7 bilhões anunciado para a proteção da Amazônia. Porém, este recurso, talvez ele nem menos vai proteger social para as nossas famílias.
It's 1.4 for Indigenous people, but none of it might actually get to us. None of it might actually help us or bring us security.
Queria agradecer aos organizadores que nos convidaram para poder fazer essa fala. Quero dizer isso não com emoção, eu quero dizer isso com indignidade. Com indignidade porque é isso que nós estamos vivenciando todos os dias dentro dos nossos territórios.
I want to thank the organizers for inviting us, and I don't say this with emotion, I say it with indignation, because this is what we're fighting every day in our territories.
E vou, para finalizar mesmo, vou dizer que uma das soluções, uma das verdadeiras soluções para a crise climática é devolver os territórios sagrados do nosso povo. Demarcação já! Demarcação já! Demarcação já!
The way to end the climate crisis is to give us back our sacred territories.
Hello, my name is Elena Walinga. I come from the same community as Abigail. My community is a community that has been suffering from the oil industry since before I was even born. And that is the reality of many, many indigenous and Amazonian communities in Ecuador and in the other Amazonian countries. But I want to talk about how is this even possible? How is it even possible that we have every year more concessions and how we every year can see more oil platforms being built in the Amazon? It is only possible because there are people financing that. And the same people that are perpetuating this violence on our lands are the same ones having the negotiations over there in that building at COP. We need to start talking about this. Behind every murder that happens in the Amazon or that happens to every killing that happens to a land defender, there is a company behind that, there is a government behind that, there is a name behind that. US and European banks are every day financing and investing in the Amazon destruction. They're investing in the killing of the Amazon and in the killing of the people. There are people actually responsible for this, and we need to hold them accountable. Everyone behind me comes from a people that has been fighting not just to protect their lands, but for our survival. We have been, I'm 19, this has been happening for years and years and years, and I'm only following the footsteps of my people and of my elders. And now the youth here have come here because it's, you know, this has been going on for generations and generations. The people behind me grew up in that violence, and now they have to take up on the fight so that we can defend our territories. It's not supposed to be like that. The children behind me, they're not supposed to have to do this in 20 years. Keep the oil in the ground. We need to phase out from fossil fuel, and that is, You know, I come from a territory where they are wanting to drill oil. And then we're talking about how fossil fuel is creating climate change, how it's causing climate change. So the same thing that is happening to our lands and our territories is what is causing climate change, which is this global problem. And then we have indigenous people on the land protecting them, protecting our lands and the forests from this. But we're also the ones that are living with climate change in our lands. I just want to end this with saying support indigenous people, support the people that are protecting the forest, support the Amazon, and let's hold them accountable. Thank you.
Voy a cantar una canción. Yo soy mujer guaraní de Yasuní, de Ecuador, en la Amazonía.
My name is Alicia, and I'm a Waorani woman from the Ecuadorian Amazon. I'm going to sing you a song.
Nosotros, mujeres, estamos dando ese mensaje para que la humanidad, las generaciones que puedan vivir en el futuro la vida del mundo que necesitan, el petróleo que quede bajo la tierra y la minería también bajo la tierra, nosotros seríamos felices para todo el mundo que queremos una vida mejor para nosotros. Y voy a cantar una canción.
This is a message from indigenous women in the Amazon to keep oil in the ground, to stop mining. That is good for all of us, for indigenous people and for the world. And I'm going to sing this song to you now.
Nanamente gokina mange, nanamente gokina mange, nanamente gokina mange, nenge tawanyonga hang ave, nenge tawanyonga hang ave. Importing a waringa, importing a waringa, importing a waringa, importing a waringa, warete vikiana wete, warete vikiana wete, monito me venke, monito me venke, monito me venke, monito me venke, warete vikiana wete, warete vikiana wete, dawa tamini, ya tamini.
Aquí, buenas tardes con todas y con todos. ¿Quién puede traducir?
Good evening, everyone.
Me gustaría ver todos los letreros y todas las pancartas que han traído y banderas de los diferentes países y el pueblo mapuche que veo atrás y las huipalas.
I would like to see all the banners and all the signs that you have brought here, and also the Mapuche flag that I can see over there.
Que se vea el poder del pueblo aquí presente.
I want to see the people's power over here.
Atrás hay un hombre en ese monumento desde que llegamos resistiendo.
I've been watching this man at the monument resisting from since we got here.
Ahí está, esa es la resistencia. Somos de la Guardia Indígena de Ecuador.
That is resistance. We come from the Indigenous, from Guardia Indígena from Ecuador.
Tenemos muchos muertos, heridos y gente en prisión.
We had a lot of siblings that have been murdered, that are hurt or are imprisoned.
Pero eso levantó la lucha en Chile, en Colombia y en toda Sudamérica.
But that is also what inspired for us to rise up all over South America, in Chile and in Colombia and all over South America.
Pero nuestros gobiernos dicen que eso es progreso porque la gente del otro mundo, la gente del otro color necesita nuestros minerales, petróleo y todo lo que ellos hacen a nombre de ustedes.
But this is only happening because the governments are saying that they need the mines and all that is on our lands.
En nuestros países dicen que ustedes necesitan todo lo que nosotros tenemos para el progreso.
They are saying that we need this for development, that we need your lands for development.
Y yo quiero saber con una bulla si es verdad que ustedes quieren la explotación de nuestros países.
I just want to ask you, do you really want to exploit our lands? Can we get some noise?
No los escucho.
I can't hear you.
Hagamos que Bolsonaro y el presidente Lazo de nuestro país sepa que ustedes no quieren nuestros productos.
Can we let Bolsonaro and Ecuador's President Lasso know that we don't want extraction?
Entonces, les invito a luchar, les invito a pelear, les invito a pronunciarse, les invito a pensar en otro mundo que es posible, porque sin ustedes no lo podríamos lograr.
So I invite you to fight with me, to speak up and to imagine another world, because it will only be possible if we do it together.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you so much.
Thinking, yeah. México. Hola. Nosotras somos una delegación de mujeres que venimos de un territorio que ahora llaman México. Somos defensoras de la tierra, de diferentes territorios que existen en este país. Venimos porque traemos un mensaje desde un futuro más esperanzador. Uno en el que logramos detener la catástrofe climática y civilizatoria. La solución no fueron los viajes espaciales y la colonización de otros planetas. No fueron las grandes negociaciones entre los poderosos, sino la organización de abajo. Los que estamos cerca de la tierra, los que sentimos la tierra, los que tenemos la tierra, los que somos propietarios de la tierra. No fue fácil, pero fue posible. Implicó tener que detener un tren Maya, al que le dicen Maya, que están construyendo en el sureste de México. También implicó detener el extractivismo en las minas en diferentes territorios del país. En 2021 asumimos la urgencia de dejar de financiar el exterminio con consumismo y empezamos a curarnos con la tierra, con el agua, con el aire. En 2021 nos quedó claro que el futuro no se negocia, el futuro se defiende. En 2021 nos dimos cuenta que las alternativas a las crisis climáticas siempre estuvieron aquí, viviendo en los pueblos que curan la vida, que están viviendo aquí en nosotras, en los cuerpos de nuestras abuelas, en los cuerpos de nuestros abuelos. En 2021 reconocimos la ciencia de los saberes ancestrales que nos han permitido vivir en reciprocidad con los territorios por miles de años. En 2021, la naturaleza es nuestra condición de existencia y por eso la lucha por la madre tierra es la madre de todas las tierras. Venimos aquí también a traer nuestras voces, a pedir justicia, justicia por los defensores que han sido asesinados por los gobiernos de México. Pedimos justicia por Samir. Samir vive. Justicia también queremos pedir por los pueblos de nuestros hermanos de Guatemala, por el pueblo maya de Quechí, de Néstor y Izabal. Sí a la vida, no a la minería.
Hi everybody. We are a delegation of indigenous women from different organizations and movements from all around Mexico and Guatemala. We have a message to you from a more hopeful future, one in which we manage to stop the current climate and civilizational catastrophe. The solutions to this crisis were not space travels or the colonization or other planets. They were not the great negotiations among the most powerful people either. The solution was in the organization from below. Those of us who are close to the Mother Earth. It was not easy, but it was possible. For this, we had to fight against a train in the peninsula of Yucatan and against a train in the Isthmus of Tehuantepec, against windmills, thousands of windmills that are grabbing the land in the Isthmus, against mining in the territory of Néstor Izabal in Guatemala, in the Maya Quechí people, the mining of all over the territory of Mexico, and depressive mega projects. For this, we lost brothers and sisters. We lost Samir Flores Soberanes, who was fighting against a thermoelectrical project in Huesca, Morelos. So that's why in 2021, we assumed the urgency to stop prompting extermination with consumerism, and we began to heal ourselves with the earth. In 2021, it became clear that the future is not negotiable. The future is to be defended. In 2021, we realized that the alternatives to the climate crisis were always here, living in the people who care for life on Earth. In 2021, we recognize the science of ancestral knowledge that has allowed us to live in reciprocity with our lands for thousands of years. As our sisters from Amazonia, they already talk about us. In 2021, we assume that the responsibility to understand that nature is our condition of existence, and the struggle for Mother Earth is the mother of all struggles. Finally, we just want to invite you to a gathering, a global gathering of indigenous women called Cura da Terra. It's a gathering to indigenous women to talk about how we heal our bodies, the land, and our souls. It will be the 10th of November at 5 p.m. in the Contemporary Center of Arts. And we ask just one thing more. ¡Alerta! 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 ¡Alerta que camina la lucha de los pueblos por América Latina! ¡Alerta! ¡Alerta! ¡Alerta que camina la lucha de los pueblos por América Latina! ¡Y tiembla! ¡Y tiembla! ¡Y tiembla ese activista! ¡Que América Latina será siempre defendida! ¡Y tiembla! ¡Y tiembla! ¡Y tiembla ese activista! ¡Que América Latina será siempre defendida! ¡Justice for Samir Flores!
That was quite long, but with a lot of people. I think it was incredibly important to hear everything they had to say. So, we have a few more speakers before we're going to finish up. Up next, I'd like to bring on Amy Ferguson from Unite the Union.
Hi, my name's Amy Ferguson. I'm a trade unionist with Unite Hospitality in Northern Ireland, and I'm also a member of International Socialist Alternative. So this week, Boris Johnson himself admitted that events like the last G8, G20, and I'd argue the COP as well, were mere drops in an overwhelming ocean. These so-called world leaders and their sponsors in the fossil fuel companies have had decades and decades to act on the issue of the climate. Yet all they have for us today still is capitalist greenwashing. We have multi-billion pound fast food companies offering us paper straws and saying job done. We have huge polluters in the fossil fuel industry continuing business as usual, and that's okay because they're planting some trees. And that's the best they can offer us. You only need to scratch the surface of their rhetoric to see that it is superficial. Since the Paris Climate Agreement in 2015, the world's largest 60 banks have invested 3.8 trillion in fossil fuel companies. That's not just inaction, that's the active wrecking of our planet. Whilst the delegates at COP pat themselves on the back whilst doing as little as they can get away with without stepping on the toes of their fossil fuel sponsors, we need to remember it's not them that put the climate on the agenda. It was the millions of students and ordinary people across the world who did that. It is these movements that have offered us a lifeline. The other week I was at my union's policy conference alongside hundreds of other delegates representing over 1 million workers across the UK and Ireland. At that conference we had a significant discussion on how we can deal with the climate crisis. Workers in heavy industries, in transport, etc. stood up to talk about how inspired they have been by the climate movement. They were talking about how necessary it is for our movements to link up. And it was recognised that while some like to pretend that we have to choose between a habitable planet and employment, the opposite is actually the case. There's so much work to be done in building green infrastructure and developing new technologies internationally. And again, the initiative for such is not coming from above. The initiative and the know-how is coming from ordinary working class people. In Belfast, a couple of years ago, the workers at Holland and Wolff shipyard were threatened with job losses and the closure of their yard. But instead of just accepting that fate, the workers occupied their yard and offered a clear solution to the crisis. Now, consider the rail workers who threatened strike action in Glasgow here last week over pay. When those workers withdraw their labour, they could have cities at a standstill and there'd be no ignoring them. And just because of the mere threat of using that power, they've won a pay rise. Now imagine if all of us fighting for investment in free public transport linked up with the workers in those sectors to exert our collective power. We could be unstoppable. And by the way, I just also want to add, it's absolutely amazing to see our striking comrades in the GMB here, so full solidarity to them. Our energies after this week must not dwindle. We need to focus on trying and building and developing on those links, on organising together for such actions down the line. And again, it's working class and young people who are pointing the way out of this crisis. We have the power, the plans and the ideas, but we can't control what we don't own. Our movement needs to set its sights on dealing with the root of this crisis. We can't afford to allow the capitalist system, the billionaires, the CEOs and their politicians to continue on their wrecking path. We have to take the power out of the hands of those who do not care. The alternative needs to be socialist. It needs to be based on the public ownership and democratic control of the major corporations and finance sector. This would allow us to develop an international plan to meet the needs of the accounts of the rich. Now, the politicians have been telling us to be realistic, to be moderate. And in response to that, I want to repeat the words of Scottish-born Irish trade unionist James Connolly. Our demands, most moderate, are, we only want the earth. Thank you.
All these people sit down here for 5-star dinners and drinks and...
The workers, united, will never be defeated. The workers, united, will never be defeated. The workers, united, will never be defeated. Up next we have John, who's from the Philippines.
Good afternoon, everyone. I am John Bonifacio from the Southern People's Action on COP26. I'm also part of Youth Advocates for Climate Action Philippines and Fridays for Future Most Affected Peoples in Areas. Right now, just a bus ride away from here, world leaders are talking about youth empowerment in addressing climate change. And for the past few days, and actually decades, youth around the world have tried to play a role in all the negotiations about our present and future. And yet we, the youth from the Global South, alongside so many more of the most impacted peoples of the world, are here. That is because we have been excluded. Peoples who have fought tooth and nail to get here to Glasgow, while billionaires and fossil fuel CEOs coming in their private jets and super yachts get to speak at COP and lecture us on how to save the planet. The Philippines is one of the most impacted countries when it comes to the climate crisis. I have witnessed firsthand how two of the costliest typhoons to ever hit the country just last year, floods reaching the roofs of 2-3-story buildings, lives and livelihoods erased overnight. On top of this, our President Rodrigo Duterte is cracking down on environmental activism, calling for the massacre of indigenous Lumad peoples, other land and environment defenders, and shutting down climate activists by calling us terrorists. It's no wonder that the Philippines has remained the deadliest country in Asia for 8 consecutive years. Gloria Capitan, Obilo Bayao, Datu Victor Danyan, all assassinated under the Duterte regime for protesting against destructive coal, mining, and plantation projects in the Philippines. The climate crisis is not an issue, it's an issue of today, not 2050, not 2030. And each second these world leaders delay action towards global mitigation and adaptation condemns billions across the world to an unlivable future. It is exactly what they are doing at COP, which in all its exclusion has devolved into a celebration of pointless promises of world leaders, patting themselves on the back, all the while sacrificing millions in the Global South on the altar of capitalism and imperialism. The climate crisis is rooted in the imperialist exploitation of people and planet. Around the world, the Global South bears the brunt of climate change and ecological degradation, all driven by a system that places profit over people's lives. We only stand a chance at changing society for the better if we look beyond conferences like COP and look around us. It is through collective organized action with the people that we can work to address the crisis holistically, both from the grassroots all the way to the international level. Nevertheless, we echo the demands of the peoples of the world leaders of the global north. Deliver on your commitment to provide $100 billion yearly to the most impacted countries. Rapid, just, and equitable emissions reductions in line with the 1.5 degrees Celsius pathway. This is the bare minimum that needs to be done. And we are well aware that the global north owes so much more to the south from the impacts of climate change, historical and ongoing colonialism, and so much more. So to world leaders, again, we are here and we will not be ignored. If COP26 will just be a space for so-called world leaders to talk to one another, then we will make our own space, the youth, alongside the other oppressed sectors of society, and forge our own way forward to build a society that's sustainable, just, and puts people and planet over profit. So what do we want? When do we want it? What do we want? When do we want it? Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, John. Up next, from the Brazil Black Coalition, we have Marcelo Rocha.
Hello everyone, I'm Marcelo Rocha, activist for climate and racial justice. I'm come from Brazil, from my community in Mauá. Also, I'm activist with Black Coalition of Brazil. And the articulation of bringing together more than 200 organizations from Brazil who have denounced and continued constant struggle against the genocide of the black population in Brazil. Our defenders, our territories, and the space of environmental is human life and against the environmental racism. The fundamental debate in climate racism is still not widely accepted or defined by environmental movements, climate movements, and great leaders. As a result, we have a lack of environmental secure urban and rural territories with a majority of the black population impacted by expropriation, water, air pollution, extreme weather events, house of risk in areas, waste service of sanitation, impacted by floods, landslides, waterborne disasters, among others. The climate crisis is also humanitarian. It has direct impact on black lives, or black population in the world. The government of Brazil has violated environmental laws and codes, and the result has the death of the black people in Brazil. The deforestation, the forests from Amazon, Cerrado, Caatinga, Atlantic Forest, and Pantanal. In the case of Amazon, the forest, indigenous people impacted by deforestation and criminal activities of legal regions, impacted the territories of the traditional peoples and communities. COP26 must be ambitious and realistic in the proposal for climate change. The developed countries and the unsustainable carbonization of the planet, our inequalities have produced over 200 years. And the collective response of developing and the poor countries for the most part and the most affected people. The global north need here the global south. The global north need here the black people. The global north need here the Brazil people, the Amazon people, the Quilombolas people, the people of global south, the people of Latin America. Poor developing countries cannot go back to being colonies, and again impacted by new zero carbon, but industrialization for only the North people. It's time to stop worrying about the laws of profit and transnational corporations. Not is for corporations, it's for the people, it's for the life, it's for the people most affected by climate crisis. It's urgent to consider other development models, other ways to living in society and reconnecting human relationship that constitute of part of nature. It's necessary to consider technology of the peoples in the global south in different voice of women, LGBT, voice of youth, quilombolas, and the peripheral people. Environmental racism and climate racism affect all movements, affect all lives, and now the black people not in silence more. It's time to hear black voice here. This is a dream of Luther King. This is a dream of Malcolm. This is a dream of Laia Gonzalez. This is a dream of Emicida, Zumbi dos Palmares. This is a dream of the black people in quilombos and favelas in Brazil. Decolonize your climate solutions. Decolonize your climate solutions. Decolonize your climate solutions. Climate justice without racial justice is new colonialism. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I'd like to invite our last group speech to the stage. So we have from Colombia, we have, are you ready guys? Sorry. We have Laura, we have Gabriela, we have Juan, and we have Emiliana.
Hi everyone, we are climate activists from Colombia, and today we want to honor the socio-environmental defenders that have been killed in the last 2 years of no COP. Colombia is the most dangerous country to be an environmental defender in the whole world, and no one cares. Especially in this kind of events as COP26, that are built on racism, classism, capitalism, and spectacle. A couple of days ago, there was an event hosted by Global Witness here in Glasgow about environmental defenders and social justice. And they didn't call any Colombian defender, and neither had language accessibility, knowing that Latin America is the most dangerous region to be an environmental defender, and it has been for many, many years. And we evidently don't speak English as our first language. Today, we want to name environmental leaders and invite you to join our fight for the life and our land. Because in our country, we had a peace agreement that has been destroyed by our president. And although he says in these events that he's a leader of climate action, he's doing nothing to protect the life and work of environmental leaders on the ground.
In our country, we say, those who die defending life cannot be considered dead. We would like to invite you to join us in saying some of their names. We cannot say all of their names because it would become night if we said all of their names. We will each name one environmental defender that was assassinated in our country and their story. After, we will say justice for this leader, and we would like you to answer back in unison, justice, while raising your fist. Let us try it now. Maritza Isabel Quiroz was a land defender and peasant leader. She was assassinated in Santa Marta in 2019. Justice for Maritza.
Justice! Juana Perea, she was an environmental leader and women's organizer opposed to the Puerto of Truga, and she was assassinated in Nuquí in 2020. Justice for Juana. Justice!
Magdalena Cucunaba, she was an indigenous people's defender from the Macaguan community, and she was assassinated in Arauca in 2019. Justice for Magdalena.
Justice!
Yamit Alonso Silva Torres. He was defender of the Cocuy National Park, and he was assassinated in Boyacá last year. Justice for Yamit. Justice!
And many more, but time won't be enough to name all of them. That's why we need the Escazú Agreement to be ratified, because it's the link between climate justice and human rights, and it's the only mechanism to protect them. Because we won't achieve any solution here at COP26 even though if we don't defend the defenders.
We need your help now. We need your help for holding our countries accountable for human rights violations, because they are not saying anything about this, and they are lying to everybody here at these type of events like COP26. They are not saying the truth, and we need your help, because there is not a single climate goal that could be achieved if we do not protect first life of those who defend their territory and the most important ecosystems, social ecosystems we need for counteracting climate crisis. So there's no climate action without climate justice. That's why we need your help to put pressure to our countries, because they're not saying a single word. And here they are greenwashing all the things they do back home.
We would like your help now. You can help us because our government does not care what we say in Colombia, but they care what Europeans think. So right now, we need all of your voices together to ask our government to ratify the Escazú Accord. Here is how to say it. Let's practice. Escazú. So now I will say, what do we want? And you are going to answer Escazú. And when do we want it? Now. Are you ready? What do we want? Escazú! When do we want it? Now! What do we want? Escazú! When do we want it? Now! Thank you very much. Up next, we have a speaker I'm very, very excited to introduce. You might have seen her on the cover of Time recently. Vanessa Nakate from Uganda. Good luck.
Thank you for coming out here. Once again, we are faced with another COP event. How many more of these should they hold until they realize that their inactions are destroying the planet? We are seeing the impacts of the climate crisis. I come from Kampala, Uganda, a country that has one of the fastest changing climates in the world. And allow me explain it this way. Abantu bafa, ennimiro z'abantu ziggwawo, abaana tebakyagenda ku masomero. When I say this, I mean people are dying, children are dropping out of school, people's farms are being destroyed. Tetumanyi the kind of future we are going into. We are in a crisis. We are in a disaster that is happening every day. Ebyamaguzi by'abantu bigwawo, amataba mu Kampala and different parts of the country. When I say that, I mean floods are ravaging different parts of Kampala, different parts of Uganda, and across the African continent. Historically, Africa is responsible for only 3% of global emissions, and yet Africans are suffering some of the most brutal impacts fueled by the climate crisis. But while the African continent, while the global south is on the front lines of the climate crisis, they are not on the front pages of the world's newspapers. We've seen activists from the most affected areas being erased from pictures, from conversations, and removed from rooms. But how will we have climate justice if people from the most affected areas are not being listened to? The climate crisis is here now, but the dry land can be glad again. The farms can blossom again. The animals can rejoice because there is water to drink. There is a loud singing in once parched lands. The pain and suffering is gone. There is a celebration of the people because the disasters are gone. Our history is visible. There is no fear of losing it. We won't have to just tell our children about our cultures because they will see and experience them themselves. We won't have to fight for limited resources because there will be enough for everyone. There is food to drink, there is food to eat and water to drink. Children can go to school with no fear of dropping out. There is joy and singing because finally no child can be forced into marriage. Once flooded places will dry and bloom again. There is triumph in the city because the power of the people finally won. The world is green again. Nature has been restored. The planet and creation is respected. Another world is necessary. Another world is possible. And this is just a glimpse of it. And today, we shall continue to fight on in everywhere we can. We cannot give up now. We need to continue holding leaders accountable for their actions. We cannot keep quiet about climate injustice. Your actions matter. No action is too small to make a difference, and no voice is too small to make a difference. Let us keep the faith for the future. Which faith will give us the hope for the world not yet seen, but the world that we can imagine, the world that I just told you about. And above all, the love for the people and for the planet. Three things should stay with us as we continue to organize and mobilize and strike and speak up and demand for climate justice. That is faith, hope, and love. And the greatest of these things is love, because when we continue to love the people, when we continue to love the planet, that will be the strength we need to fight for a future that is sustainable, that is healthy, that is clean and equitable for all of us. Thank you.
That was incredible. I'd like to invite our second last speaker, Ina Maria from Namibia. Thank you.
Hello, Glasgow. Oh my goodness, so many people. How are we doing? Yo, before I start, I would like to honor all of the defenders, our indigenous people that came all the way here to deliver their messages. Honor the sacred, honor the indigenous people that are all here today. My name is Ina Maria Shikongo. I come from Namibia, a desert, a beautiful country, surrounded by two deserts. And today we have a company all the way from Canada, wanting to frack up the Kavango, putting my people at risk. And I am asking COP26 today, why do you keep on whitewashing everything? Stop talking about the Nazi genocide only. Let's talk about the genocide that you have imposed on our people. Globally. You colonialists, you came to our continent, you took our ancestors, You enslaved them. That was the genocide. You went to the Americas. You caused genocides there. And you never talk about them. You went to Africa. And you are still continuing with your genocides. Boris Johnson, the genocide that you people are endorsing is happening right now. Let's talk about Cambo. Let's talk about Recon Africa. Let's talk about ECOP. What's up with all of these new oil projects? What is happening in Mendoza? Yo, people, we are tired of your neo-colonial trends. The generation that will hold you accountable is this generation. It has been born. We are here today because we know that COP26 won't do anything. They want to continue the massacre that they have been responsible for hundreds of years already. Your worth is built on the blood of our people. And we want change. We will not give up. We want justice for Ken Saro-Wiwa. You people have to be held accountable for the genocide and ecocide that you have been causing. We want justice for the people in Ecuador. Chevron, stop your lies. Free Donsinger, Stephen Donsinger, free him. You cannot keep on oppressing our people. You cannot keep on coming to our countries claiming that you are bringing development when all that you are bringing is devastation. You are poisoning our waters. I am here to defend my homeland today. The Kavango, the birthplace of modern humanity, the oldest DNA is in the Kavango. And yet COP26 is the whitewashing, cropping activists out of pictures. What's up with that? We can defend ourselves, and we will defend ourselves. And now I am going to teach you a chant from my homeland. Please repeat after me. Ihatu sholola. I will just add, it means you will never give up. Ihatu sholola. Ihatu sholola. Ihatu sholola. Then again, COP26, please stop your bullshit once again. Thank you very much.
Definitely reiterating that message, stop the bullshit. Next up, we're
Excited to welcome Greta Thunberg.
Thank you everyone for coming. What a great day. It is not a secret that COP26 is a failure. It should be obvious that we cannot solve a crisis with the same methods that got us into it in the first place. And more people are starting to realize this. Many are starting to ask themselves, what will it take for the people in power to wake up? But let's be clear, they are already awake. They know exactly what they are doing. They know exactly what priceless values they are sacrificing to maintain business as usual. The leaders are not doing nothing. They are actively creating loopholes and shaping frameworks to benefit themselves and to continue profiting from this destructive system. This is an active choice by the leaders to continue to let the exploitation of people and nature and the destruction of present and future living conditions to take place. The COP has turned into a PR event
where leaders are giving beautiful speeches and announcing fancy commitments and targets, while behind the curtains, the governments of the global north countries are still refusing to take any drastic climate action. It seems like their main goal is to continue to fight for the status quo. And COP26 has been named the most exclusionary COP ever. This is no longer a climate conference. This is now a global North greenwash festival. A 2-week-long celebration of business as usual and blah, blah, blah. The most affected people in the most affected areas still remain unheard. And the voices of future generations are drowning in their greenwashed and empty words and promises. But the facts do not lie, and we know that our emperors are naked. To stay below the targets set in the Paris Agreement and thereby minimizing the risk of setting off irreversible chain reactions beyond human control, we need immediate, drastic, annual emission cuts unlike anything the world has ever seen. And as we don't have the technological solutions that alone will do anything even close to that, that means we will have to fundamentally change our society. And this is the uncomfortable result of our leaders' repeated failure to address this crisis. At the current emissions rates, our remaining CO2 budgets to give us the best chances of staying below 1.5 degrees Celsius will be gone within the end of this decade. And the climate and ecological crisis, of course, doesn't exist in a vacuum. It is directly tied to other crises and injustices that date back to colonialism and beyond. Crises based on the idea that some people are worth more than others and therefore have the right to steal others, to exploit others, and to steal their land and resources. And it is very naive of us to think that we could solve this crisis without addressing the root cause of it. But this is not going to be spoken about inside the COP. It's just too uncomfortable. It's much easier for them to simply ignore the historical debt that the countries of the global north have towards the most affected people and areas. And the question we must now ask ourselves is, what is it that we are fighting for? Are we fighting to save ourselves and the living planet? Or are we fighting to maintain business as usual? Our leaders say that we can have both. But the harsh truth is that that is not possible in practice. The people in power can continue to live in their bubble filled with their fantasies, like eternal growth on a finite planet, and technological solutions that will suddenly appear seemingly out of nowhere and will erase all of these crises just like that. All this while the world is literally burning on fire, and while the people living on the front lines are still bearing the brunt of the climate crisis. They can continue to ignore the consequences of their inaction, but history will judge them poorly. And we will not accept it. We don't need any more distant, non-binding pledges. We don't need any more empty promises. We don't need any more commitments that are full of loopholes and incomplete statistics and that ignore the historical emissions and climate justice. Yet, that is all that we are getting. And no, that is not radical to say. Just look at their track record. They have had 26 COPs. They have had decades of blah, blah, blah. And where has that led us? Over 50% of all our CO2 emissions have occurred since 1990, and about a third since 2005. All this while the media is reporting on what people in power say that they are going to do, rather than what they actually do. Time and time again, the media fails to hold the people in power responsible for their action and inaction. As they continue to expand fossil fuel infrastructure, opening up new coal mines, coal power plants, granting new oil licenses, and still refusing to do even the bare minimum, like delivering on the long-promised climate finance for loss and damage to the most vulnerable and least responsible countries. This is shameful. Some people say that we are being too radical, but the truth is that they are the ones who are radical. Fighting to save our life-supporting systems isn't radical at all. Believing that our civilization as we know it can survive a 2.7 degree or a 3 degree hotter world, on the other hand, is not only extremely radical, it's pure madness. Out here, we speak the truth. The people in power are obviously scared of the truth. Yet, no matter how hard they try, they cannot escape from it. They cannot ignore the scientific consensus, and above all, they cannot ignore us, the people, including their own children. They cannot ignore our screams as we reclaim our power. We are tired of their blah blah blah. Our leaders are not leading. This is what leadership looks like. Thank you for showing up, and see you tomorrow again at the march.
Thank you all so much for coming. That was incredible to hear. I'd like to invite the group from Fridays for Future Glasgow, who are responsible for organising this incredible day.